So having delivered your assessment, you now need to give your students information on their performance. And that's probably most commonly referred to as feedback, but most of you will already know that I much prefer the term feed forward. I would argue that this sort of qualitative performance evaluation is significantly more important than the provision of a grade. Whilst a grade gives a student an idea of where they sit on this sort of sliding scale towards pass or fail, it gives them no information on why they're at that point or how they can improve for the future, or even just continue with maybe these good skills that they already have. That's why the term feed forward is more appropriate than feedback, because feedback tells you what you did in the past, whereas feed forward tells you what to do for the future. And I think we can probably all agree that that is of more value. So you will have your own experience with feedback. Some of that will be good, some of it will be poor. And what students often think they need is the answer. Now, we do routinely provide students with marking rubrics prior to assessments. It helps them structure their submissions and really focus in on the points we're looking for. However, despite having that in advance, there's still a really wide range of performance. So that tells us that given the marking plan alone is not sufficient. What our students really need from us is prompts to help them seek out further information so they can apply that to future events to get better. When students go through the process of finding the information themselves, it's so much better retained. Simply telling them the answer, as they requested, might help them pass a resit, but they're very unlikely to remember it in 6 months' time. So to give you an example, let's say I'm assessing a student who's giving local anaesthetic. So at the time, they can tell me what anatomical features they're looking for, in terms of where they're going to inject, but they aren't able to tell me things like which nerves they're anaesthetising or how the actual anaesthetic agent works. So I wouldn't be able to pass that student I wouldn't be able to pass the student for that assessment because although they might physically be able to do the procedure, they don't have enough underlying knowledge to safely complete it. So afterwards, what I would like to do would be to have a conversation with the student about what the risks are associated with providing local anaesthetic without the knowledge of the nerves or the agent that they're using. That might be quite a quick conversation let's say in the situation where the student just kind of had a crazy mind blank and in the nerves forgot what they were doing. That might actually be quite a long conversation if it's more of an ingrained issue with the knowledge base. But once we've got that information from them, the importance of knowing it, then I would be looking to direct them toward resources where they could find the information that they're lacking. And I would be very specific with that, particularly for undergraduate or FE students. So I would be saying things like, here's a list of references. Here's pages or at most chapters of a textbook to read. Here's some specific research papers. Watch this video, really specific guidance. So although I'm not giving them the answer directly, I'm giving them really clear information on how to find it. If I was just to say, here's what you got wrong, go and find it out, that really wouldn't be feed forward at all. The other thing that can be really helpful for students in their feed forward is linking it to the learning outcomes that have been assessed. So let's say that assessment had 5 learning outcomes. The student might have been perfectly competent in 4 of them, but for one of them, they didn't manage to demonstrate competency. So identifying that one learning outcome for the student, as opposed to the whole assessment, can really help them focus their attention on where they need it. Students will always have a tendency to work on the bits that they find easiest. It's human nature. So if you can say to them, this point here is what you didn't get, it'll help them focus on it. That does, however, present a bit of a question regarding the student who passes an assessment but doesn't have all the information that we would like. Now, we've spoken before about the sort of 100% pass situation or the pass-fail situation, but if we presume for now that we're talking about, say, like a standard sort of 50% pass type assessment, the number that you place on that pass is actually somewhat irrelevant It could be 50, it could be 80, it could be XYZ. That's simply where you've chosen to set your standard. So if it's 50%, a student must be safe in order to achieve that mark. Anything that would make them unsafe as a clinician would automatically take them below that 50% and they wouldn't pass. So therefore, anything over 50% is a bonus. In that type of exam, in that setting, the students only need to pass. That can be a difficult concept for us as educators. We tend to be those individuals who are always striving for better attainment, always wanting to get more and more and more, and hence why I've ended up in this job. But not all students are like that. Some students won't be particularly interested in getting better if they've already passed. That's fine. That's their choice. As long as we've set our standards correctly, that will ensure that they're safe. For students who have passed but also want to improve, feed forward is still really valuable. The last thing I would say just now about feedback or feed forward is that it is a very time consuming process. So anything we can do to reduce that load is really valuable to us. You may wish to do some form of debriefing after an assessment for all the students together, so in a group setting. And in that setting, you can go over sort of general points that were missed, or even some specific points, obviously without pinpointing individuals in that group setting. It's probably not going to be the only form of feedback you provide, or feed forward, sorry, you provide, but it can certainly cut down on the time it takes to do the more specific or targeted feed forward. The other thing to be clear on when you're writing your feed forward is what it is you are assessing. So when I mark, if I'm dealing with a script, I'll annotate it as I go using like comments function on Word or Adobe. If it's a practical assessment, I'm going to write notes as I go, and I would say that is essential. You cannot rely on your memory to write feedback all at the end. All the assessments will start to blend in together. But when you're writing your notes, have those learning outcomes being assessed at the forefront of your mind. Don't feed forward about things that, whilst they might not be perfect, are not actually relevant to the marking scheme. So for example, say a written assessment, maybe the grammar isn't great or the spelling could be better, but as long as you know what the student's trying to articulate, it actually doesn't affect the mark that they're being awarded. And in a practical setting, perhaps the student's positioning wasn't ideal, or maybe their posture was poor, but it didn't actually affect how they performed. So I'm not dismissing the importance of all these elements. And for the student that's performed very well and is just looking for little tweaks to make it perfect, that kind of feed forward is fine. But what I am saying is that we cannot possibly feed forward on every single element that could have been done better, particularly if we're dealing with struggling students. We need to focus on the things that will make the biggest difference to them. Feed forwarding on everything would be overwhelming for us and also for the students. Too much feed forward is a bad thing. So the resources I provided with this week should help you consider not only what you're providing in your feed forward, but also physically how you can go about it.